League of Legends, a game that many refer to it as the most popular online video game in the world. While that may seem like a very bold statement, there is some reasoning behind it. For as of September 2016, League of Legends had over 100 million registered players enjoying the game. I myself am a new player who was sucked into the world that Riot created mainly because of the champions. In League, you take the role of a summoner, as you choose one of over 100 choices of a champion to represent you in battle, as you team up with other summoners to defeat your opponents and destroy the enemy core. However, there is more to the game besides just minions, turrets, inhibitors, ultimates, and so on. In fact, Riot has created lore for almost every champion, where they come from, how they got into the fight, and why and how they ended up the champion that they are now. With over 100 champions, there's bound to be some disturbing or sad backstories that go for our beloved champions. So for this list, we'll be going over 10 champions with the darkest backstories. Lee Sin. Despite the fact he is a champion for summoners, Lee Sin originally wanted to be a summoner himself. He was much more determined than most of his peers, and his skill was so great that he was noticed by Reginald Ashram, the League's High Counselor at the time. Lee Sin, however, became frustrated with the pacing the students had to take, so he decided to study ahead of his class in hopes of an early graduation. He would have become the League's greatest summoner if it wasn't for one grave mistake. Lee Sin became impatient and wanted to test his power. He tried to summon a beast from the Plague Jungles, but what he summoned instead was a young village boy, but not in one piece. He barely had enough time to look at that boy in what was at one point his face. Because Lee Sin was a remarkable student, the League decided to overlook this mistake, but he couldn't live with himself after what happened. He left the institute and traveled to the Shojin Monastery, vowing to never practice magic again. Even after so many years, he holds this mistake against him, to the point where he just couldn't take it anymore. He decided to protest against the Noxian occupation of Leona by lighting himself on fire. He stood there for weeks ignoring the pain. It was almost as if he was immune to the flames. But sadly, that's not the case, as when the flames were finally put out, Lee Sin's eyes melted from his sockets, never to see again. He was seen as a savior though, and was given life once more. He decided to use his second chance to join the League of Legends. Vi, a champion that believes that every problem is just a brick wall for her custom Hextech gauntlets. Even if this ideology may be a bit foolish to some, Vi has used this thought process to protect the Piltover as a police officer. Piltover is seen as an innovative, progressive city. However, Vi wasn't always like this. When she was a very young orphan, Vi was a bit of a troublemaker, but only to survive. When she turned 6 years old, a group of criminals saw her potential and decided to take her in. Everything then changed when she was 11, and a raid on a mining facility went horribly wrong. She had the choice to escape with her criminalistic allies or stay behind to save the survivors. She quickly jumped into action and tore off an arm of a robotic mining rig and customized it to fit her small arms, and then crashed through the rubble. For the next couple years, she would improve her technology, and eventually she would be noticed by famed Piltover Sheriff Caitlin. Ever since then, they've been working alongside each other to protect the city of Piltover. Leona. Leona was born and raised in the higher peaks of Mount Targon, where everyone fights for war. However, while she definitely was able to hold her own in the battlefield, like her old childhood friend Pantheon, she did not have a desire to kill. She'd rather much defend and protect rather than harm and kill. Years later, during the Rite of Core, which is a traditional ceremony where two Rakaran teens fight to the death so they could be rewarded a relic weapon. Not only did she refuse to kill, but Leona refused to even attend the ceremony. Her people were not too happy about this, however, so she was sent to be executed. Before she could be killed, a huge wave of light covered the mountain, and Leona remained unharmed. Her execution was repealed by the Solari, a group of retired warriors of Mount Targon. She was then given the golden armor of the Solari and a sword and shield belonging to the Ancient Sun warriors of legend. Brand of the Burning Vengeance. Though he wasn't always burning, there was once a seafaring marauder named Keegan Rode, who traveled the seas in front of him and stealing from others in his path. One night he sailed through the Arctic waters to see a strange light he couldn't resist. Him and his crew discovered a cave covered in ancient runes. No one could decipher these runes, so they continued on anyway. Farther inside the cave was a cage of ice, floated a dancing column of flame. Keegan was somehow hypnotized to the flame and walked closer and closer. And that's it. That's the last thing he will ever remember, for his body now belongs to Brand, a creature of the past that died during the Rune Wars. The creature Brand is filled with seething hatred and a desire to lay waste of man and Yordle. Later, he was captured by the forces of Demacia and was given a choice: die or join the League. Obviously, you know what happened next. Anivia. Next we have one of Brand's rivals, Anivia. We all know what a phoenix is. A fiery bird associated with the sun. When it dies, it will only return to the ashes of its early predecessors. Well, think of that, but with ice. Anivia is a cryo-phoenix, and also the physical embodiment of ice magic and an ancient protector of Freljord. But how long has Anivia existed if she keeps dying and being reborn? Well, long before humans stepped in Freljord, that's for sure. But with this much life and death and one bird's existence, how much of it does she remember? Vladimir. Being a champion that can control blood and also named after Vlad the Impaler, who we went over in our top 10 forms of torture throughout history volume 1, Vladimir has to have some sort of dark past, right? Well, not really dark for him, but still dark. There is a temple hidden between Noxus and the Tempest Flats. This temple holds many secrets of terrifying magic. It is literally surrounded by decaying corpses who have made the mistake of wandering too close to the temple. But Vladimir was different. Vlad in his past was a troubled teen with an addictive desire to kill. It started when he killed 2 boys of the same age as him, for no reason besides to see that crimson glistening liquid come out of them. He knew he couldn't control his temptation, and if he stayed in Noxus for too long, he surely could be caught one day. This is what led him to the temple, where he found a crimson-eyed monk who was willing to teach him blood magic. They practiced on nearby explorers, explaining the corpses outside of the temple. After his final lesson, the monk's blood was ritualistically put into Vlad's body, making him stronger. He then returned to Noxus to demand an enrollment of the League. Aleister. You'd think this demonic-looking, bull-like monster would be one of the causes to someone's dark story. On the contrary, he was more like the victim of his own. Aleister was one of the mightiest and strongest warriors that ever came from the Minotaur tribes of the Great Barrier. He defended his home from many dangers until one day he was lured away from the village and came back to see it burning to ashes, along with the death of his family. Filled with rage and anger, he charged into the Noxus army, who attacked his village, where he killed them by the hundreds. Eventually, he was caught and chained up and sent over to Noxus, where he would become a gladiator for the mere entertainment of the wealthy leaders of Noxus. He would have become a mindless monster from this torment, if it wasn't for a young servant girl who helped him escape. He then joined the League of Legends to get revenge on Noxus and any unfortunate Noxian he'd come across, and also hoping one day he'd find the servant girl again. Warwick. Warwick, a man who once lived in Zon, who made a living out of hunting test subjects for other madmen to perform their heinous experiments onto. But eventually, he got too good at his job. As word got out, he was receiving a large amount of requests to obtain more rare specimen. He needed a boost in strength, stamina, and power. Ally, Singed, just so happened to be making said boost. However, he needed ingredients, so Warwick was more than happy to retrieve them for him. He needed a silver from the Shadow Isles, the fang of a balefire direwolf, and the heart of a celestial being. Warwick was able to get the first 2, but he couldn't get the heart, which he was going to kill Soraka for. But she was able to escape his clutches. Warwick demanded that the formula be made anyway. Singed warned the angered procurer about the consequences, but he didn't care, and consumed it whole. He became a mix between man and wolf, strength enhanced, advanced senses, and sharpened instincts. However, on a daily basis, he slowly feels himself losing control, often failing to bring back test subjects who needed to be alive. Morgana. There's a place full of winged beings who are granted immortality. However, despite how great that may seem, it's a place full of conflict. Conflict that's still going on to this day. One side claims that they're being of justice and perfect order, while the other side are seen as tyrants. Morgana is one of these angelic creatures who fought in the side of justice. Morgana is not an innocent soul, however, for she was determined to learn black arts for the sole purpose of killing the opponent's leader and her sister, Kayla. But Kayla was not that innocent either, as she was denying any connections to Morgana simply because she didn't want to join her side. Their final conflict was on the horizon, but before she knew it, she was taken to a place called Valoran by a summoner. Said summoner made Morgana a deal. She would fight in a league, while the summoner would grant her more strength and power. She now fights in the League of Legends for the sole purpose of defeating her sister in battle, and hopes to one day kill her and return home a hero. Dr. Mundo. Yes, despite his dumbfounded appearance, Dr. Mundo was a genius who was born with no conscience, but instead a desire to inflict pain onto others. When he was 5 years old, most of the pets within the area he lived in Zon went mysteriously missing. In his teenage years, his parents went missing as well. So, how many went missing? Well, by the time he legally obtained a license to practice medicine, he already had over 38 charges of murder that he was never locked up for because of lack of evidence. Dr. Mundo became half scientist and half serial killer. It was safe to say that he was good at both. As a scientist, he was able to map the pain response in the human brain and body and how to repress it. Even though Mundo is a psychotic killer with a seemingly endless bloodlust, he was able to make scientific and medical breakthroughs. He even impressed Noxus by creating the perfect science-enhanced killer. So much so, that there were rumors that the high command of Noxus gave him the freedom necessary to continue his life's work. So why does he look the way he does? Mainly because of the many experiments he had, and that he was glad to test on himself.